Right, as Rick very kindly introduced me, I work for Melbourne Uni here part-time as their EV safety trainer supervisor for what's called the Formula SAE race event. So the final year engineers build, engineering students I should say, build their Formula SAE race cars. Used to be a fossil car, or I should say internal combustion car, and a electric car has come in the last 10, 12 years, and as of this year there's actually an autonomous division starting, which will be really interesting. So Melbourne Uni are looking at converting either starting this year or from next year, or they actually convert their previous year's electric race cars that they build each year. The previous one will go to becoming an autonomous vehicle. So it will be great fun. It's a really good engineering experience for the students. They get a lot out of it, and I really enjoy working with the students, and keeps me sort of my mind active as well. Today I want to talk about electric cars, but it's as I always say, we'll better turn that on first before I press the buttons. It's not just electric cars. You've got trucks, and by the way, everything here is actually built on the road, mostly for sale. Some of the things aren't yet for sale, like this here is the Tesla truck in demonstration form around America at the moment, being shown off the fleets. That at the top is the SEA truck here in Australia, where they're doing conversion or new truck conversions for garbage trucks and large trucks. Obviously electric bicycles. Who here tonight came in one? There's one in the middle. Oh, a couple more. Probably a few more people own them but haven't come in tonight. Motorbikes. There are actually a number of electric motorbikes available. You can actually buy electric planes. That one there is Pipistrel Alpha. You can look them up. There's a regular route over in West Australia somewhere. But yeah, they're available overseas. There are actually flying cars. That one up there is called the Black Fly. It has just been recently registered in America for sale, and it's meant to become in longer term or fully autonomous. It's a single person flying thing, vertical takeoff and landing. Autonomous ones, that's built here in Croydon as a test vehicle. That's actually lives. That's been driven around Melbourne Uni a while ago for a video that was taken. And that's a low-speed autonomous vehicle for that last mile, or last kilometre, we should say, transport. Buses, some of the buses in China, I think there's about 15, one of the cities in China has got 15,000 fully electric buses already. So they're definitely coming. There's the C40 cities network, of which about 24 are signed up to only buy electric buses by 2025. They include Rio, I think, Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, Auckland, a couple of other, obviously 21 other ones, none of them Australian yet. And ferries, that thing there has a 4.1 megawatt hour battery and does a regular route, about a 20 kilometre. Yes? Well, that was a question. And there's a whole fleet of them starting to be built now. There's a number of them on the water already. And they save something like 80% in fuel costs, 90% in emissions. It's just, and they're so quiet. So it's not just cars. So just as a reminder, we're not just talking cars in the long run. Tonight I talked just about cars, but there's heaps of things. I didn't even put scooters up there. We've seen them in JB Hi-Fi and Woolworths, they're selling them, let alone electric bicycles where they're selling them cheap at Aldi. Okay, I'm dreadful with acronyms. I keep using them. EV field is full of them. So I thought I may as well give you some diagrams and show you what you can get. So on your left-hand side is your battery electric vehicle, the BEV. And it obviously just plugs in and recharges and off you go. Very simple thing. It has a thing called regenerative braking, so that energy as you're slowing down, rather than putting it into wasting energy and creating dust and wearing out your brake pads and your brake discs, it actually turns the motor into a generator and recharges the battery. And it will actually give you between 5 and 20% of energy recovery from what you've been driving around. Again, if you're driving around town, it gets towards 20%. If you're driving down the highway, obviously there's not a lot of slowing down happening, so you don't tend to end up with a lot of regeneration there. But that's called regenerative braking. All electric cars, apart from the converted vehicles that use DC motors, do it. The next one along the line is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. That's your Outlanders and things like that. There's a number of them around. Some of them have quite the Holden Volt is a very good example of those, and that has basically a petrol motor, has a smaller battery, and it will basically be a combination of, you can drive it around on battery only if you keep under the range for the battery. So for the Highlander, I think it's about 50 kilometres, the Volt is about 70 or 80. Some of the ones that are available now are a bit token, like they've been around 12, 15 kilometres. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Next one across is your hybrid electric vehicle, AEV, and they have no plug, but they're very similar to the plug-in hybrid. That's why the difference is a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. But the hybrid purely is an energy, basically petrol-saving device. It's not really, although it's got an electric motor in there, it's not what I would call an electric car as such, because it's purely saving energy for you. I'll come to it a bit later as well, but England have just updated the date when they banned sales of all internal combustion engines, or ICE. They're including hybrids in that ban. So you have plug-ins or batteries, but no hybrids. Well, obviously no ICE cars. And the last one on the end is the fuel cell electric vehicle, or otherwise known as the hydrogen car. That I may or may not make a few comments a bit later on about, but the detail about them is they are still an electric car, but they have a smaller battery, and they will use the energy of conversion of hydrogen to water to gain some energy back, and that energy is used as electricity to drive an electric motor. So it's still an electric car. Anyway, that's basically my acronyms covered. I'll talk a little bit now about the advantages and disadvantages if you're thinking about buying any one of these vehicles. What reasons make you choose to buy one or not buy one? Okay, the old battery, the standard battery electric vehicle is very simple. Very much lower fuel costs. I'll go into some numbers a bit later. But they are very simple, very low maintenance. I have a Kona electric. It's $165 annual service for the next 10 years. And it has, that's its fixed fee for it, and that's 15,000 kilometres or annual, which I so enjoy driving around. I managed to do my 15,000 kilometres in 6 months. But that's another story. Easy to recharge for anything from a power point upwards. And I'll talk a bit more about that later, but they're pretty much, you can recharge an electric car anywhere there's a power point. It's a bit quicker if you start using a more dedicated piece of equipment, but for all intents and purposes, if you're running out of fuel, it's not like trying to find a jerry can, get down the road, find a little petrol station, might be several kilometres away, get a lift back, tip it in, get fuel over yourself. It's just knock on the door and run out of extension lead and plug in for half an hour. Of which I only had to do once in 8 years, and that was my own stupid fault, so I was deliberately trying to run that conversion battery down. I did it rather too well with a couple of cases from home. And DC charging, which I'll also come back to. Thinking of phones, I thought about that a moment ago. I forgot to put mine on silent.
Louder question.
A bit louder in voice?
Yes.
Oh, is the microphone not working?
Not really.
Oh, in that case, I'll speak a bit louder. I was relying on the microphone. Yes, having heard that phone, I thought best I actually turn mine off. That would be really embarrassing. I was doing a class with the Melbourne Uni students, and I got to the start of the session and saying, don't forget your mobile phones. And my bloody phone went off. Complete accident. Anyway, your disadvantages, they do have a few still. They're obviously more expensive, but they're coming down, and a lot of the predictions by some of the economic houses are around 2024, 25. They'll reach parity with your middle range of petrol cars. So your cheap and cheerfuls they won't be parity with, but your $25,000, $30,000 cars, they'll become somewhere around that parity with probably around the 35, 40 kilowatt battery. Which car is it? The MG ZE EV, which is a small SUV-like car, they're putting in for a louder. I'll try and speak a bit more. And there used to be a microphone here. If I stand here, is that better?
Yes.
Yes. Fair enough. I hate hiding behind lecterns, which is my bad habit. The MGZE will be coming out. You can order one now for $47,000. That's similar to my Kona. So as I said, the batteries will be a little bit smaller, but that's a 40 kilowattish battery. My Kona is 64, but it's about $15,000, $18,000 cheaper. So they're coming down quite quickly. If you're relying only on a PowerPoint, they are a bit slow to charge. I'll come back to that a bit later. And the DC chargers are not yet a good full network, but they're getting better. I mean, I've driven Melbourne, Sydney, Coffs Harbour, due to the bushfires that were starting in, I think it was late September or October, somewhere around there. I actually went inland, and there's enough DC charges I could go to Tamworth, Dubbo, stop there for the night, and then came back from Dubbo back to Melbourne. There were enough DC charges for me to get my way home again. So I was back in one day from Dubbo. Best use scenarios, city driving, obviously pretty good. Most of the larger battery ones will easily do 300-400 Ks, 500 Ks for some of the Teslas, my Kona. We'll take you into states where there's a DC fast charging quite easily. As I said, I can comfortably do that in mine. As the DC chargers roll out, it gets better and better. And Teslas, because they have the bigger charging network and some of the biggest batteries, you could pretty much replace everything with a Tesla. Plug-ins. I'll be a bit briefer now, sort of run through that sort of background part. They certainly reduce consumer anxiety about EV range, as that old hoary chestnut called range anxiety. I think with the longer batteries and DC chargers, and once you get used to it, range anxiety is a dead concept in terms of the current crop of vehicles. But there are still people that aren't used to EVs yet, which is most people. They're still a bit worried about this range anxiety. So it is one way of allaying that range anxiety. And it can run exclusively on battery power on these shorter trips. So Holden Volt, when the people started buying those, they found that the petrol was going stale on the petrol tank because people realised most of their driving is short range. And the petrol motor didn't start up for a month or two. And if you haven't got time to recharge or there's no recharging available, you can just top it up. They do have two systems in the car, so you've got to service both, so it is higher maintenance costs. You're still tied to using fossil fuels on your longer runs. And as the BEV price, battery electric vehicle prices fall and their ranges extend and the DC charging networks, the use case for a plug-in hybrid is getting sort of narrower and narrower. If you can imagine, it used to be quite a handy thing to do your round town stuff, and everything out of town was with the petrol. Nowadays, with the DC charging, a BEV would comfortably do it if you're doing Melbourne to Sydney, Melbourne to Adelaide type trips. It's only along Great Ocean Road. The chargers aren't there yet. They will be soon. So as I said, that use case is getting smaller and smaller. Use case scenario is a single car household within the EVA range, semi-regular long runs on non-DC fast charger routes. As the DC chargers roll out, as I said, that's getting narrower. Or if you've got a multi-user household of one car, then sometimes the car comes in and someone grabs it. Perhaps the FEV is a better option there. Hybrids, that's your old Priuses and things like that. As I said, they are being treated as an ICE car as far as the banning of sales coming along. But they were in the past used as an introduction of electric vehicle technology to people. They do reduce your fuel costs, as I said, between 5 and 20% of saving that braking energy. Again, both systems, and primarily the biggest killer is it is still a fossil fuel car. It is purely, the electric part is purely energy saving. Congested city taxi drivers love them because they save them that up to 20% in because they're driving around town and they can just quickly refuel like they always used to. So where your charging options are poor, very good option. I'll talk more maybe about that if I have time, about that last point. Okay, and I'll whiz past these. They do produce just water, fine, bit of hot water out the back. They do reduce your fossil fuels maybe. I have a slide next to say that they don't. You basically need to run it off renewable energy and have non-fossil fuel sources, neither of which is true at the moment. Negligible refuelling stations. We have one in Australia. Energy usage is 4 to 5 times to do the same distance in a battery vehicle. Much higher purchase costs because they are very complicated. Most hydrogen at the moment is from cracking methane. And strange enough, they're now running a pilot plant on cracking brown coal. They may have their uses. Long-range EV driving, very fast refuelling. The minor detail is, and I'll come back to it later, the DC fast charging is now getting so fast that advantage is being lost. As I said, with the 350 kilowatt CCS chargers coming out for DC, they can get you 400 kilometres range in 15 minutes. And if you're only doing that on interstate highways, that's less time than it takes for a cup of coffee and a toilet break. The numbers for hydrogen, nobody's ever really proven to me there's anything better than that still. If you're a battery electric vehicle, start off with 100 kilowatt hours there, 69 kilowatt hours you get in usable movement of the car. If you compress the hydrogen, don't liquefy it, you'll get 23 kilowatt, quarter of the way that the battery electric vehicle. And if you liquefy it and move it and dispense it from a fuel station, 1/5. So I jokingly say, who here's sort of probably 25 or under? A few people, 30 are under. But people have expected they may still be around at the year 28, the 2080s. They hope to still be around. Who here expects to be still around at the 2080s? Who here has also seen the film Who Killed the Electric Car? Yeah. I suspect there'll be a film come out around the 2080s. So all those people that were here tonight, remember that old bastard Bryce tonight said, there'll be a film come out about that time called Who Killed the Hydrogen Car? Because that'll be its time. When there's renewable energy and renewable sources for hydrogen, who cares if you're wasting lots of energy to produce the hydrogen? It has its uses. And there'll be a home for hydrogen then. But at the moment, it doesn't really have an energy budget to stack up. Anyway, that was my little diatribe about hydrogen cars. Elon Musk is somewhat more disparaging about them. He calls them fuel cells. Anyway, EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment. You hear that name thrown around a lot. It's called the electric, as I said, electric vehicle supply equipment. For an AC one, the one that basically runs at the home, it's nothing more than an automatic power point. You plug it in, it's got some electronics in it that talk to the car, and the car says, oh, you're an EVSE. He says, yes, I am. I can deliver you 16 amps or 3.6 kilowatts, or I can deliver you 32 amps and 7 kilowatts. And the car goes, oh, good, I'll have that, thank you. Turns on, and then when the car says, I'm full now, it tells the charger, okay, time to disconnect, and the lead then between the car and the charger is turned off. So there's no live lead unless the car itself is charging. And that's the whole point of them. They're an automatic power point. For safety purposes, they're only live when you're actually using it. It automatically turns off. So there's all sorts of ones. I'll talk a bit about that. And then DC charging, the other charging system. That's actually a different part of the charging plug, or in the case of Nissan and Mitsubishi, a whole different big round plug called the CHAdeMO plug. And they charge via DC. And this is a DC connection directly to the battery. For those ones, there's an AC to DC converter inside the car. So it converts because the battery is obviously a DC source, so it needs DC current to charge it. So the car has this little AC to DC charger in the car to do the job. Those things directly to the battery bypasses that AC charger, and they'll charge much, much faster than your home charger. Yep.
That means they've got a nice big inverter in there.
Yes. They are big, they are heavy, and they are super expensive.
And that's why they're always wondered why.
Yeah, so that's why they're there and not in your car. So that's why the ones in the car for the AC to DC are small enough. They've sort of come to around 32 amps is a nice number maximum, so 7 kilowatts. These things will deliver you, that one on the left is the Australian-built Tritium. That will deliver generally up to 50 kilowatts. So 7 into 50, someone can do the number. That one on the right will do 350. That's the difference, so that's 20 times. And they will give you, therefore, much, much faster charging. And that 350 kilowatt charging at the moment would be good, but the car also, my Kona is limited to 70 at the moment. So it's just as the cars are coming out, they're getting bigger and bigger charging rates. The Porsche Taycan, I think it is, will be the first car that'll do, it's currently doing 250 and will soon do 350.
Is this at the expense of battery life?
No, they're improving the battery chemistries enough. That's part of the reason why they haven't gone that far yet. So Tesla have pushed them up to 250 now. Yes?
I'm just wondering, is this going to end up in one of, VHS versus Betamax type?
Bloody good question. Yes, it has. It basically, the VHS system has one. There are two systems. One's called the CHAdeMO, and the other one's called the CCS, Combined Charging System. CHAdeMO was basically a Japanese system and is now only used by Mitsubishi and Nissan. Everybody else in the world uses the CCS. So the battle is over. So yes, they do have two different plugs there to keep the manufacturers happy, but the one there, that's the big chunky CCS one, CHAdeMO one, almost never gets used.
What's the charge time on the 350?
If you've got the new architecture 350 kilowatt charger in the car, or the car will take it, you'll get up to 400 kilometres charged in 15 minutes. As I said, hydrogen's advantage in speed is dying very quickly.
So does the Tesla use, is that standardised to use those same?
Yes, it's a good question because Tesla, I'll digress, Tesla wasn't that they tried to be different to everybody else, as they were first. And then they said to other manufacturers, we're rolling out a network, would you like to put some money in? And they went, no, we're not supporting Tesla, we want you to go broke. So Tesla just kept building them and using their plug, and the rest of the world decided to adopt the CC or the Type 2 plug. So Tesla went, beauty. So when the Model X and S came out, because the original Tesla plug was different again, they adopted the Type 2 plug, which was supposed to have the two of the pins were part of the DC charging system. But then the rest of the world said, nah, we're going to have two extra pins. So they put them down the bottom and called it the CCS. So it's Type 2 with two big pins. So the whole world has now chosen that CCS. CHAdeMO's sort of falling away. And Tesla's gone, bastards! So what they've done now is they have, with the Model 3, adopted the CCS plug. So they do now have it. So the new Tesla chargers have CCS plugs like everybody else, but it is still a closed network because they've gone, you're not putting money into our system, we're not opening it up. But it could be opened up now. So at any time they want, they could do a subscription system. And there's rumours that might happen. So yes, everybody has basically settled on the CCS system. So that's your DC charging, and they give you much faster charging. You will hear about modes. In your manuals, when you get the car, things they say you've got a mode 2 or a mode 3 charging. Mode 1 to start with, nobody uses. That was some of the very early EVNews had it, and it basically was you've got a lead out, you plugged into a power point, and it charged the car. There was no little electronics to talk to the car. So the lead was always live. So they then introduced the thing that you plug into the power point, have a little box in the lead, and that's got the electronics, and that bit then only turns on and off when the car is charging. That's safety issue. So that's Type 2. So that's basically the one that comes with the car, and you pull it out. It's your emergency. It's like a spare tyre. You should never really use that all the time. A number of early people with EVs have been doing that, but it's generally speaking they'll wear out the thing, or the plugs wear out or melt, because those plugs aren't meant for that sort of high current, lots of use. That's where you go to these things where it's a dedicated charger, and the electronics are on the wall, and that piece then turns on, and it's a much more chunky plug, and it will take many thousands and high current events. So that's basically mode 2 and mode 3. Mode 2 is your plug-in stuff. Mode 3 is the thing on the wall when you plug it in. Pretty simple. And mode 4, as I do there, that's AC, still AC, and then DC. So those big chunky chargers, whether it's on the curbside, is the mode 4. So you'll hear those terms bandied around, and so I thought I may as well chuck them up. By the way, if anybody wants these sets of slides, my email address is at the end. I'm happy to email them to you. I PDF them and send it. It's about a 65 megabyte file if I tried sending it in one piece. Back to that charging speeds. To give you some samples, this is for a Kona. This is for the car I own. If I plug it into a power point, my 64 kilowatt hour battery will take 28 hours. But if I'm only doing 50 to 100 k's a day, that's a quarter of its range. What's a quarter of its 28? 7 hours. So if I do 100 k's a day, I plug it in at night, I've still covered it the next day, even on a power point. So if I'm dropping around to a friend's and they're 100 k's away and I'm staying there the night, I can recharge at a power point, no trouble. I'll skip the next couple and get down to here, 32 amps, that's what I have at home. I have a dedicated wall charger like that. And I can do a full charge, if I completely drain the battery, overnight for 9 hours. So home charging will do pretty much the deal for you. If you're on the highway, that's when you want these things. And as I said, 75 amps per phase, and it's 3 phases for these things, so they draw a lot of current. That's my 50 kilowatts, and my Kona will charge in an hour and a quarter to 80%. That's presuming I've done 0 to 80%. And that there's a trick to driving on the highway with an EV. If you're doing the 100 kilowatt hour ones, which is the next stage size up from that one, it will charge in 54 minutes because it is only 70 kilowatt. If I plug it into a 350 kilowatt one, it'll still only charge in 54 minutes because it can't go fast. Yes?
You're talking DC, right?
Yep.
And you say 75 amps per phase?
Yes.
Per phase as well?
Per phase into the rectifier. So it's 3-phase supply from the grid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's the grid supply. It's 75 amps a phase into it to get your 350 kilowatt. Yeah. 350 or 500 amps DC. Yep, I'll amend that slide accordingly, but yeah, it's a rectifier from AC to DC. Because it's so big and chunky, it has to be on the street. It'll take up probably half the passenger compartment of the car if you put it in there with all its cooling system. So massive amounts of current. They cost 10,000 to 100,000 plus for the units, so obviously that's for like petrol station type setups. So that gives you an idea of the charging speeds. The trick with on the highway though, it's not going to take me 54 minutes, so I'm not going to run it down to zero. What I do is I leave home, I've charged it up to 100% on my home charger for my 9 hours overnight, so even if I was flat the next day, I'm charged when I leave in the morning, and I leave and I'll stop probably Barnawatha and I'm down to about 50% charge. That's 3 hours driving. I need to stop for a coffee and a toilet stop, whatever. And I stop there, and that's about 20, 25 minutes by the time I've plugged it in, grab a coffee, or I bring my own thermos or whatever. I'm ready to go, I'm feeling nice and refreshed, and off I go. So that's 50 to 80%. And you don't charge it beyond 80% because the trick with this is, the reason it's sneaky, they say to 80% for DC charging, is it's a curve like that. So when you get to 80%, it's quite quick, but then it tapers right off, and it's basically the same amount of time from 80 to 100 as it is 0 to 80. So unless you're really desperate, don't do 80 to 100.
Is it better for the battery life if you do charge it over to 80%?
Theoretically, but people have been abused them, like, not abuse them, will do to 100s, like taxi drivers and just use DC charging all the time. Even the early ones, they didn't seem to find much in the way of degradation. Some of the Teslas have been, I think the first one reached 1 million miles recently. And supposedly the batteries are getting better again, and they're not guaranteeing. I think the Tesla truck, they're going to guarantee 1 million miles. So, as I said, you leave, so you 20 minutes stop for your first stop, 3 hours in, drive till lunch, you might get down to 25, 30%, spend 3/4 of an hour for lunch anyway, there's your time done, and then you're on to Sydney.
How often do you not find the charger, someone else's charge, using the charger? Have a 40-minute break.
That's my usual scenario.
That's going to change.
Yes, but not in a hurry. Not in Australia, they're not selling them that fast. Yep. Until recently they were free, now it's 40 cents a kilowatt hour.
Is that typical for commercial charging stations?
Yes, essentially 40, 50 cents per kilowatt.
Not quite twice as much as you pay for your household.
Yeah, so you're effectively paying a premium for doing it, but they say that 90+% of charging is done at home. So you're basically paying the premium for that few events that you might be doing per year, that one interstate trip, whatever. My car's been a bit different. I've probably done about a third of its miles on DC charging so far. That's 17,000 Ks. Oh, no. Get back to, I'll go back. There we go. What's coming around the world? Bucket loads. That's just a selection. VW ID3 rolling off production line now, going up for sale in a few weeks, and they're being produced in the very large numbers. That fella there is the ID Buzz 2023. Kia e-Niro was coming here start of this year, pushed back to late this year, maybe next year now. It's basically a Kona, by the way. There's a Peugeot, there's a couple of full electric Peugeots. Try and get a few. There's a BMW i4, I think, VW ID4, Porsche Taycan, which you may see later this year. That's the Tesla Model Y, and that's the Opel, but it's also the Vauxhall Corsa E. Same thing.
Is that the same as the Bolt?
No. But the Bolt was only the Bolt was sold as the Ampera E in Europe. With the sale of Opel and Vauxhall to Peugeot, that's now off. Australia, we're not quite so lucky. That's what we've got now, which is it's better than it was. A year or so ago, it was probably only half that. They're all basically the models and numbers, and those prices that I picked up off car sales in the last few weeks. I just put what are the current prices you can pay for the things. What's coming? We may see between 5 and 8 new cars this year. So that one's definite. They're taking orders now. That's 47 on the road. That actually was, officially they were taking orders at the end of last year, but the first one's only becoming available now. That's been pushed back, so it may not be till 2021 now. That is probably pushed back even further, the other Kia. Porsche Taycan's supposed to be in the first half of this year. It's top of the line luxury car. Tesla Roadster may be next year. They've pushed that back a little bit. There's these two here, EV Automotive, they're a Dongfeng. He's hoping to bring them in sometime this year. And they're both, that van in particular, I think, will probably sell like hotcakes because it's pretty much be the first one. Model Y, they're way ahead of schedule in producing them. So they're already talking about delivering them to the first customers in April. This is overseas, which means there's some talk about they start overseas deliveries fourth quarter of this year, which means, reading between the lines, it may be an Australian, if overseas includes right-hand drive, we may see them before Christmas, fingers crossed. And the Ace Automotive, that's a Australian assembled vehicle from parts built one of the Asian countries, Thailand I think, which may get up this year as well. It has been suggested it'll be available this year. There's definitely at least 1, 2, 3 or 4 definites, and then you're working away from there. So we're not getting anywhere near as many as overseas, but we're seeing some more. There are second-hand options, and you can buy them. I'll not go through the detail of each one, but just if you want to check these on the slides later, when I email them to you. I had one of those previously, the Nissan Leaf. In fact, I just sold it. They're good for still about 100 Ks on their batteries. They were the ones that did degrade. They're the ones that gave EVs a slightly bad name because they didn't get it quite right in terms of the cooling and a few other things. The rest of them all seem to be holding out quite well in their batteries. If you look at the BMWs, by the way, 2 issues there. One, they do have 3 different size batteries, so make sure you know what size battery it's got. And secondly, they did come with optional DC charging, but it's also optional CCS1, which is the American AC plug, which is no longer what's used here, but they came in here with that one. So there's a bit of an argument going on between their owners and BMW about, unlike New Zealand, when they mandated the CCS2 plug, BMW changed the plugs. Here in Australia, they're going, no, we won't. So watch out.
Sorry, it's just a matter of changing the plug, or is it the whole system time?
It's about a $3,000 job. So it's not a huge system, but there is enough of a system that they say it's... And depending on which one you've got, it could be anything between about $2,400 and $4,000. Yep.
What about the Chinese model?
There's that one. That's the MG is Chinese.
Great Wall was saying about it mentioned in India.
Yep, they're not bringing them here yet. There's no government support for EVs, so obviously, given how many difficulties they're having in building enough batteries to get all these new models on the road, Australia's last on the list. So we're lucky to be getting anything sometimes, I think.
The Mini is due here.
Yes, that's right. I better add that one.
That's only a small amount, like tiny amount volume. The Mini, yeah, tiny volume. Just get it out there.
Yeah.
Like 45 grand.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that one. I'll update it. Just every time I've got it, think I've got them all, somebody goes, what about, oh, fuck, I forgot about that one. So there are a number of second-hand ones available. If you're daring, you could go for some of the private, there's some grey import ones. And if you're really daring, there were a number of Blade Electrons. A number of people may have heard of them. They're converted gets from new. How many people have owned them? How many people... Yes. And how many people regret having owned them? Only because every one of them was built as effectively a prototype. So every one of them, I fixed the number for people and they drive them. Yes. The issue with them is he didn't really have enough money, so he kept updating and changing them without actually having a car that he could actually do the changes and test it first.
So you've done about the role for the second hand?
I'll answer this one first.
Can we just go back to the Nexo? I mean, it's now approved for use in Australia, but how is it that it's a well-developed model? It must be used surely in Japan, Korea, etc.
Yes and no. They're building them, but last year fewer hydrogen cars were sold than the year before, when EVs were taking much faster trajectory. And as I said, we have one. As I've actually mentioned it earlier, I don't think they have a future personally. I think their time has not yet come. There's just not the refuelling. The whole point of it is, in the first part of the 20th century, there were three types of cars. There was external combustion, called steam. There was internal combustion, petrol, kerosene, and there was the electric. Now, all three were in roughly equal numbers. That time, electricity in general was not anywhere outside of the very largest of cities. So it was very hard to get electricity, and they were fairly small grids. So if you're in the suburbs, you didn't have electricity. So there wasn't a great deal of electricity around. Petrol, kerosene, you can take anywhere, put in a drum, leave it there, and don't forget, for the first 20, 30 years of petrol cars, you bought your fuel in 2-gallon drums. You didn't have petrol. First petrol stations were pretty much after World War I. So people could take a jerry can anywhere and refuel, whereas electricity, you couldn't, and steam, you had to wait 3/4 an hour for the car to start up. So steam and electricity died off, and petrol took over. And my prediction is that hydrogen is the same. You can get electricity everywhere now. Whereas hydrogen, we have one refuelling station in Australia, second's getting built. The fast charging network is rolling out as I talk for electric cars. It's just they're going to be beaten to the punch. Yes.
Charging stations vandalised much in Australia?
Not that I've seen yet.
So what you can pretty well guarantee it's going to be there when you do.
Yep. I haven't. Well, most of them, the big stations, are part of the big servos. So the servos, the pumps don't get vandalised. Yes.
I know none of them, except the expensive Tesla, have towing capability.
I'll come back to that. If you hold that question, I actually deal with that one a bit later. I bet it'll take too long. Okay, now I'm going to start speeding up a little bit.
You dropped you didn't include the volt on the second-hand.
I didn't include anything other than a full battery, so I didn't include the plug-ins. They're about 20 grand, and the people that own them love them. I've got nothing against them. It's just to keep the talk a little bit tighter, I didn't bring in FEVs. And the other thing with Holden dropping out, that makes it slightly problematic because they're 2012 models now. They only have to support them for another 2 years. And then there'll be no network to support them. You could buy parts for them from America, but that's what you'd have to do. There would be no dealers. So I would be even less likely to recommend a Volt now, unless you've got contacts to bring things in overseas. Why they're good? Why they're in pretty much no tailpipe. So it's lots of health benefits there around the inner cities. Overall emissions, I'll put that up on the next slide. Negligible emissions of using your own solar and wind and or subscribing to green power. Obviously no coolants, no oil, no brake pads, way less used, no spark plugs and all that sort of rubbish. Yes, there is some issues about sourcing of some of the battery chemicals, minerals like cobalt, but that's actually being addressed at the moment. But it also applies to pretty much every other thing that gets mined out in third world countries. For you, service costs are definitely much reduced. I mentioned $165 for the Kona instead of an escalating price as the cars get older. Way cheaper than petrol. I'll come to that in the next couple of slides. And if you're on the right tariff, your fuel's pretty bloody cheap. Okay, I'll explain this slide in a little more detail. This is using the government's own data, so the National Greenhouse Accounting Factors, and the methodology as required under the reporting protocols of the IPCC. If you do a 10,000 kilometres a year travelled, 2017 BMW i3 versus a 2017 Corolla. Similar-ish cars, sort of the closest comparison I could come up with at the time. And I'm doing it on the city and combined cycles. So basically EVs are efficient enough that they do a combined cycle. You generally don't have a city cycle. Okay, if you are running it in we'll start off with combined cycle. The Corolla will give you roughly 1.5 tonnes CO2e or equivalent, so it's all the greenhouse gases, not just CO2, for 1 year, for 10,000 k's. That's 1.5 tonnes. In Tassie, quarter of a tonne. So what's that? For 1/6. South Australia, about a half. That's just running on the grid, by the way. We're not talking doing your offsets or your solar panels. This is straight off the grid. In Northern Territory, just over a tonne, so still only 2/3, 66%. Similar for the West Australian grid system. Queensland is still, what, 20%-ish? Similar for West New South Wales, even on their brown coal. In Victoria, 1.64 versus 1.55. So a combined cycle, we're a little worse off in Victoria. It works out at 5.6%, assuming you've done no solar panels, no green power, none of that. If you're just using it around the city, so just for the city cycle, the Corolla bumps up another half a tonne. So if you're just using it around town, you've already saved in Victoria. That depends on what you're using it for. Unfortunately for me, I'm probably equivalent to that. So, but I have solar panels, so that's my way around it. So
0.64 is getting less by the year as well.
Yes, I did this originally as analysis in 2012 and for 2017, and it was significant how much it come down. But by the way, the petrol cars had also come down, but nowhere near as much as the electricity grid. So that's using the government's own methodology and statistics, so chew on that, Craig Kelly. What benefits all my savings? Yes, I'll give you my assumptions. Renault Zoe, 133 watt-hours per kilometre, or 13.3 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometres, seems to be the number that people are starting to use more often. 10,000 k's again, because I like 10,000, because if you do 20,000, double it. If you do 5,000, halve it. If you do 15,000, add half to the 10,000. It's a nice number to play with. Okay, I'm going to assume 25 cents a kilowatt-hour just for the fun of it. 8 litres, 100 kilometres, 98 RON fuel. Okay, what does my EV cost me for 10,000? $332. So I've added $332 to my usage part of my power bill. My internal combustion engine car cost me $1,200 in petrol. So yes, I've added $300 to my power bill. I've saved, what's that, about $900 in petrol. Then you add your service savings, $250 roughly for a Zoe, $150 for my Kona, $250. So you say looking at around $1,100, $1,200. That's just 10,000 kilometres, and it obviously changes depending on how many k's you do, what your charges are. So they do a lot of good for your back pocket as well as the environment. Now back to your towing questions and that. Okay, first of all, your criteria. Pretty much, if you're doing less than 50 k's a day, any EV on the market now will suit you. Again, you don't have to go through all the details of the slides now. It's in either that article there, or send me an email. I'll post you or email you the slides. It's actually one of the articles on the Driven on 17th to the 7th last year. I update this probably every 12 months. If you're doing 140 k's, still every new car on the market will do what you want. 300 k's, this is the Kangoo falls off the list, and it sort of goes down. If you're following a Tesla supercharger route, anything but a Tesla, you may not be quite so easy, although the DC chargers are now rolling out, so I should probably put question marks there. There's actually more and more of them coming. Towing, your question. Model X is about 2.5 tonne towing capacity. The Model 3 has 920. The Jaguar I-Pace has 750, I think. You didn't hear this from me, but the petrol Kona tow bar fits straight onto the electric. They haven't rated it, they just say not recommended for towing. I didn't say don't tow. They do say that they will eventually rate it, but when, we don't know. Some more coming, the e-Niro, e-tron, the EQC, I should move now. None of those have towing ratings yet.
What's the problem?
Nothing.
Why are they concerned?
Electric car is way better for towing than a petrol car, but they can't be bothered rating them. That's probably the answer.
What would be the range? Like, it's severely hampered the range, wouldn't it?
As towing does with a petrol car. The Audi e-tron will have, actually, I'll have to change that. They just did a demonstration towing with an Audi e-tron across America with a GM EV1 on the back. EV1, by the way, was the first production electric car that General Motors produced and then crushed. I don't know, there's about 40 of them still in existence.
Oh, there's 40?
No, there's a number of them. They bob up. But yeah, they got hold of one and towed it. Just to prove a point. But it did also knock the range down by about 40%, I think. But if you're towing on the max, it was right on its maximum. And it was, so it was right on its maximum towing. So knocking 40% off the range. If you put a full big caravan on the back of a big four-wheel drive, you're probably half the fuel range you would have if you didn't have it. The same for most of it. 30%-ish for the Model X, I think they talk. Yes.
I saw a Tesla at the sustainability exhibition with a huge caravan behind it, which they were using as an office to sell Tesla stock. And the Tesla had a tow bar, to my surprise.
Yeah, the Model X.
You didn't tow that here with this, did you? He said yes, it's got the same tow rating as a Prado.
Yep, precisely. It's about 2.5 tonnes on the X. And the new Tesla truck, they're talking, I think, on the biggest capacity, like about 4 tonnes, 5 tonnes. Quite large. And all of the next, I didn't mention the, about 18 months' time, there'll be 5 large four-wheel drive type dual cab utes on the market. And they all have very big tow ratings. Because EVs tow way better than a petrol car, or even a diesel. I also threw in the used EVs. So if you're doing less than 50 k's a day, unless you... I always say the Blade Electrons, they're a good introduction to conversions, because what you do is you buy one, you strip out all the electrics, put in the system that you know and will work, and say you repaired it as far as the exposure to the tape. Didn't hear that from me either. Somebody turn the tape off? No, but yeah, you can actually repair them with a really robust system, but the systems in there, you wouldn't feel confident. So I put that in, but I always talk with that proviso. But yeah, you can get a number of EVs. That thing's following my dog. ENV Dan is basically a Nissan Leaf, but these are grey imports, so the dealers won't touch them. Just beware. That's for that one. And those 3 on the end are, or those 2 are grey imports, but these are all the other potential vehicles you could get. So there are, if you're doing just short round town stuff or local commuting around a country town, even some of the second-hand ones will be fine. All of them will be fine. And some of them, maximum budget of 30,000. The Leaf, they're getting down to 12, 15,000 now. IME's around 10 to 12. Blade Electrons, yes, it'll probably just clear out someone's backyard for them. They'll be happy to see it go. Wind, consider an EV, your practicality side. The current switchboard and street supply, I've written an article on that. That's in Renew edition 143. So there's lots more detail there about what to look at your switchboard and see if it's up to the story or how much extra it may cost to put it in. It's not the EV's fault, by the way. It's just your EV has sort of triggered an upgrade that was going to happen sooner or later. And somewhere to charge off street. That's my car, my previous Leaf, charging up there, and it's just a nice little spot I can charge. So they have a nice convenient spot, and I've written an article on that where where's a good spot was cited, etc. Yes?
If you did break down somewhere, so down a fault, can a normal mechanic fix it?
No. Well, it depends on the mechanic, what was broken down.
The other one was, if you miscalculate, you're running out of battery, and it's stuck somewhere, what do you do?
2 answers to that. One is with the Mycona, you'd have to have rocks in your head to run it out because it has so many bits and pieces of data. On the Driven, I actually wrote an article about it. There's so much information and data that you couldn't possibly run it out, A, without actually having lots of warning beforehand. B, if you're starting to think you might run out, there are various economy modes you can switch into that will drag out the range further. So you'd have to be pretty unlikely. It's much the same as running a petrol car out. Either you've topped it up beforehand or it's given you lots of warning, and then if it's the yellow light comes on and you still go, it gives you a bit more range, just like a petrol car does. And eventually it'll cough and splutter and stop with the petrol car, whereas the EV will give you turtle mode in the end, and give you a few more Ks. It'll just really power limit, and then eventually it will shut you off. And it's called literally turtle mode. It will just limit the speed and unlike a petrol car, if you can find somewhere, even an old cocky farm shed with a power point, you're in business. Obviously, the cap tariff is important. You don't want to accidentally have a demand-driven or a maximum demand tariff where your tariff is based on whatever's the maximum usage, so you wouldn't plug in your EV during the day when everything else is on because it gives you the highest rate. It's only some Queensland things do that, and commercial. But just beware. And I've written an article on that in edition 144. You may need to buy adapters and things because, back to that vandalism question, a lot of public chargers like that don't have a lead on them, they have a socket. And you just take your lead and plug it in. In fact, I changed that to a socket for a while for the exercise and discovered for home use, don't put a socket in. It is a pain in the bum. Because you have to unroll the lead, plug it in, unplug it, roll it back up, put it back in the boot because it's my lead that I use for the public chargers. I just leave that in the boot and then I put that lead back on for the Kona. Can be useful to carry higher power EVSEs. You can actually buy them. Did I put pictures? Yes. That one will do anything from 8 amps to 32 amps or from up to 7 kilowatts. In fact, it'll do up to 22 kilowatts if you have a Renault Zoe. And it's just a matter of, you can buy those things. I've got some that I've made for myself in the days before you could buy those. Now, when you have the no option when you consider an EV, and I've jokingly said on an interview recently with the ABC, we might end up looking, if we don't start doing something about EVs and bringing in dates like this to stop selling them or some sort of incentive to buy them, and everybody's kept their petrol cars right up to 2040, nobody after this 2040 date will be building them anymore. So we can't buy them anymore. So we'll become the Cuba of the South Pacific, keeping all these old cars going with cobbled together parts. And not only is that, these are dates that are being set, UK recently just changed that in the last week to 2035. And they included hybrids in their new updated version. If you're after more information, the AEVA does actually have a lot of fact sheets on each of the new electric vehicles, and as they are released for sale, we put the new sheets up. That's the website at the moment. That is about to we have a new website going up within days to weeks, which probably means another month. Anyone involved in IT or websites will realise that when it's supposed to be going up tomorrow, it means next month. So it's very, very close. It's looking very nice website, and all these are going to be moved across. But for the moment, that's where they are, and they'll also have a link. So for the next 6 months or more, they'll still be available via that link. Any burning questions? Okay. So I timed myself for an hour, and I think I almost made it. Yes.
I'd like to ask about
sorry. I'll grab this one first. I was putting.
Sorry, no.
That's all right. No, I'll grab you first.
So how long do the batteries last, and what happens to them when they don't work anymore?
Also a very good question, because the batteries they last, or they're guaranteed for roughly 70 to 80% after 8 years. So if you use 80 or 70% less before 8 years, they'll give you a new battery. B, at that point, they're not dead. They're just simply not quite so good for a car anymore. So if you're doing most of the shorter range stuff, you may not even notice. You're just charging up a bit more often. And C, if it does annoy you and you put a new battery in, the battery's not thrown away, it will be recycled. In Japan, they're now taking old Leaf batteries, unpacking them, putting all the good cells back together to make another good reconditioned battery. They're taking the not quite so good cells that have a bit of high internal resistance, repackage them as backup grid systems, so home battery systems, backup buffer systems for high DC chargers where you don't want to plug 3 or 4 EVs at 350 kilowatts, that's a megawatt, and the grid is suddenly, everything goes brown. They like to put a container of batteries and they'll trickle charge the batteries, plug your cars in, start pulling a megawatt, all that comes off the batteries first.
All recycled?
Yes, so they all go, and they're good for another 10 more years. So that's what happens, and Renault are already experimenting with that, BMW are, and there's a number of systems starting. It just hasn't been enough electric vehicles to get that recycling into them. And the third question part of that is they are about 90-something% recyclable in terms of materials, even if you break them down and recycle them. Back to it.
Actually, another application, they're 90% recyclable. Is anyone doing that with?
Starting to. BMW are signing contracts for it. Tesla are working on it. There's a number of companies who just hasn't been enough cells around to. Our Western economic system says there's no money and they won't do it. Yeah. So now there's enough cells coming around, they're starting to look at it and there's money in it.
So I'm wondering what is left in the waste stream. So the heavy metals or other elements, they can be repurposed?
Yes, so all your lithiums, your cobalts, all that gets pulled out and recycled, your plastic goes off. As I said, it's something like, I've heard 96%, but I think it might be a bit higher. Somewhere just over 90% would be a fair statement. Just above, yes?
Are there any extra dangers of doing a road accident?
That's also a good question because in theory, no, because a battery will sort of be slow to anger, if that makes sense. Unlike petrol that would then run out over a hot surface and go poof. Electric car, the first ones that went up in flames were the Holden Volts that were crash tested, and they went up in flames. As I was recording that, I'm going to put that back on. They went up in flames about 3 weeks after. Because after the crash test, they got parked in a wrecker's yard to sort of just forget about for a while. And because the batteries were damaged, they were starting to leak internally, they started to short out, and that's when the fire started about 3 weeks later. So, yes, they can catch fire, but A, they don't do it as rapidly as a petrol car. B, they will tend to sort of start and get bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, the other side of that coin is that when they start, you can't put them out. And the Melbourne Uni crew discovered, luckily, with only a small 12-volt battery made of spare cells, it just started going up, and it was a complete mess at the end. I should, on my phone, I've got some pictures if you'd like to have a look. The best trick with those is if you can put it in a bucket of water, if it's small enough, just chuck it in a bucket of water. Don't hit it with a hose because it'll actually split the hydrogen and oxygen from water, and it goes, yay, we've got more hydrogen. So I always said the perfect Formula E racetrack will be Albert Park Lake. So if the battery really did have a problem, chuck it in the water. It's a bit hard to throw a few questions. Okay, I'll correct you.
Vehicle to grid, are there any realistic prospects for that?
The CHAdeMO system was designed with vehicle to grid in mind because Japan, with its earthquakes and whatever else tsunami is always very, very aware of this. So that was designed and was built into that system. So there are, Nissan does sell in Japan vehicle to grid systems you can build into your house. Minor detail is they cost as much or more as a home battery system at the moment. They are bringing them here, but they're not legal to install yet. So they will do it here. Whether people will go for it or not, I'll leave that to the market.
Okay, so those are the only obstacles to it at the moment.
Yeah, the CCS system, there are systems being experimented with here now, I know. So both DC charging systems, they are being experimented. CHAdeMO already exists, CCS is very close, and they're actually, I know of businesses here actually building and experimenting with them. Bit hard to, I'll go for the back.
What's the availability and delivery time?
Availability and delivery times is, it depends on the model, but generally a long time. Kona, there are some if you can grab now, but it was, I think about 4 months of mine. They blew out to about 9 months. The Ionics blew out beyond 12 months for a while. And there you go. If you get the right colour and the right everything else, yeah. It really depends. If one turns up and it hasn't been, and they just didn't want that colour, and they send it, because they just send what comes off the line. They basically won't build to your preference.
What the Ionic guys tell me is that AEVA's not sending a whole lot over here in the markets. What we know the market's not strong.
The Kona's 40 a month for a whole of Australia. I feel so. You'd be had a question.
Yeah, with the catastrophic accident or damage, is there a kill switch? Because some of the, like say the Porsche Taycan, it's 400 volts. So
800 volts.
Oh, 800, sorry, yeah. So is there a kill switch like they have in race cars?
It's automatic. It has basically connected to your crash sensors. Yeah. And the conversions we did, we had a system set up that had just isolated the charge inside the battery, and it broke it up into four 5 60-volt sections, and the Formula SAE cars have that sort of relation. It must be cut off to only contain within the battery, and sometimes they'll break it up inside the battery. Oops, sorry, I'll grab you next.
A couple of points. One is it possible to import as an alternative to buying here?
Yes.
The second question is, there's obviously a software race going on as well. Can you talk a bit about the features and functions and who's leading that charge, presumably Tesla?
That's a huge open area of discussion for me.
Well, it hasn't really been touched on.
Yeah, I deliberately leave that out because it's a whole hour on its own on autonomous vehicles and last mile vehicles and all the other options. So I tend to stick to what's going to be the next 5 to 10 years. So based on that, assume that autonomy and things is not going to be particularly big in the next 5 to 10 years. After that, I don't know. As far as the technology race for all the software, Tesla, yes, are ahead, but some of the others are not far behind. I can't think off the top of my head. I was reading some of the other manufacturers, what they were experimenting with recently, and it sounded quite interesting. So Tesla definitely are further ahead by a number of streets, but they are, the other manufacturers are starting. Mercedes, I know, do a fair bit in that area as well. And directly in front.
Yeah, I was going to ask, a vehicle to the home, if you want to self-consume for the solar generation, is there any potential there? Having a battery on the wall.
I often say it's a great idea because it's a big battery, and there are systems that will be available for it, and they'll be coming out soon. I also say that if you want to back up against a power failure while you're away on holiday, and the fridge doesn't go off, your battery happens to be with you in the car when you're on holiday somewhere. So I'm not entirely certain people are going to be totally happy with vehicle to house. Whether it will power the house, whether they think that loss of backup when they're away is worth the trade-off, I don't know.
You didn't answer the question about importing.
Oh, importing, yes, I said yes. You can. The laws have changed now that you can bring in fairly recent cars as well as older cars. Those grey imports that I listed are anything up to 2017 for the Leafs. I believe someone's bringing in the current model Leafs as well. I'm not sure how they do it.
My brother tried to bring in an S from Hong Kong, and the dealers wouldn't.
Yes, I should have qualified that. Yes, you can bring them in under the law now, whereas you used not to be able to, but the dealers won't touch them. And that's what I was saying about that they're grey imports, what's called a grey import, and the dealers will not service grey imports. But it's absolute black and white.
So that's the official dealers or any dealer?
So if they're a marque dealer, they won't touch them.
Yeah.
So a mechanic's quite happy to do it if they're EV aware. They can do it, but you can't take your Nissan Leaf to your grey import Japanese Nissan Leaf to a Nissan dealer. They'll just go away. We don't service them. Yep.
I bought a Nissan Leaf parallel imported from Japan with documentation including the service manuals, Australianised from the Memorial Road, and I was so excited that I bought another one under the garage in Lisbon. It was wonderful to drive.
Yep, they're very good. And I had.
Very low mileages. And be my prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, they're quite good deals, but as I said, you just got to be aware that the dealers won't service them. On the other hand, I had my Nissan Leaf for 5 years. I had it serviced once, so I just did my own checks, and there is bugger all to the servicing. So unless something goes wrong, in which case a Nissan dealer probably wouldn't know how to fix it. I didn't say that.
I did ask the local Nissan dealer before I bought mine, the second he was the controller, and they said they'd be happy to service it, but there would be no warranty. That's the
Yeah. Yeah, so they may be relenting a little bit. Usually the dealers just go. The usual stories are they won't touch them.
We have yet to test them.
Yeah, so good luck. I'll be very interested to hear actually. Questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was interested in charging home or domestic charging stations that enable you to manage when you charge and in particular charge from your own solar.
Yes, that.
Are there many? I'm aware of one.
2 or 3. There's the Zappy. I can't remember the brands he does, but there's 2 or 3 others, not just the one. But I can't. Yeah, there are 2 others, but I can't remember the names off the top of my head. I know I remember 3. I can't remember which of the other 2.
What's the experience
They work quite well. It's just you literally tell it how much solar, how much percentage solar you want. It measures your solar output and will charge and follow your solar output. Yes.
How do you have car insurance?
Same as a normal car. Yeah, some insurers are really thinking about them, and others are no hassle at all. Yeah. Just ring around.
What about manufacturing the trade valley? Is that high in the sky?
No, that's FCEV. That were those big trucks. They are doing big truck conversions. They're doing them in Dandenong at the moment, and they're moving down to do conversions of trucks. So it's rubbish trucks, large carrying trucks.
Is that a current Australian company?
Yes. Yeah, SE. Look them up on the web. SEA.
That's a converted to.
Yes, but they're new gliders, so to speak. They're new trucks without mechanicals in them. Any other questions?
What about aircraft and long-haul transport?
That's a good question. The question's on aircraft, and the question about aircraft is that Norway has set 2040 as the date for all short-haul aircraft to be electric. So,
What about long-haul? No, think of the saying that origin would be obvious replacement.
yeah. That's a good answer to that one. That's one of those things that hydrogen may be the answer for. It's just long-haul aircraft. But even short-haul battery is the way. Yes?
If we do all electric vehicle, then I think we need twice the amount of electricity as we currently.
I think that's actually an urban myth, because you've got what they call the duck curve. If you do all your... I've been sitting in on discussions and conferences where I've heard from people like AGL and those Origin, and they say no problem.
Well, I don't think it's a problem.
I think the question was to do with, do we need twice as much generation capacity to feed EVs? And the answer is partly to do with what they call the duck curve, so it goes up and down significantly. So you encourage people not to charge at the peaks, get them to fill in the troughs, and it flattens it out to the point that it virtually, I think it was 6%. If everybody went electric cars, it might be 6% more power.
That was the progress I made, is that we ran out control of when you would do the charging.
Yes. So there'll be carrots and sticks. So the carrots will be tariffs. Sticks might be that they won't... there have been talk about sort of you can't charge from a PowerPoint, and I can't see anybody ever managing to stop that. That would be impossible. Yes?
You missed tariffs of petrol tariff, like the government takes up
Yes,
tax.
about 40-50%.
So someone's going to have to pay for the roads.
There's multiple sides to that coin. One is we're not spending all that much, billions of dollars overseas, so that's all homegrown electrons, not imported fuels. Our balance of trade suddenly way better. B, the amount of you you save on health benefits of not all the local pollution. So all of a sudden the government's not going to need that much money.
So there is that thinking that they won't need to have a tariff for...
Yeah. So there is a strong argument saying they don't need to do it because they're actually saving a lot of money. At the moment they're still hooked on we need the money, and they still haven't worked out how to do it.
That could really swing the economics of that.
Not a lot. Even if they double the price, it goes from a third to two-thirds the cost of petrol. So you're still well better off. So even if they charge you double for the electricity, you're still a third off better than you were on petrol. Any further questions, or I'll hand back to... Oh, yes, Rick himself.
Would they have a road, some sort of road tax, so much per kilometre on every vehicle?
Yeah, that's, how do you get the per kilometre? Is the question. Yeah. One of the answers would be like New South Wales has an annual roadworthy sort of test, a fairly basic one. They just take a copy of the odometer reading and that's your bill. Yeah. Yes.
I've just made you Prime Minister, so what are you going to be your rules for electric vehicles?
We will ban them by probably 2035. for sale of ICE vehicles. We would have incentives for tax incentives for fleets to buy them, because that's where the first early introduction, more expensive cars would come in. So they would be bought into fleets and faster depreciation rates, so it encourages the business to sell them early and get them out into the market. And a number of incentives that way, as well as supporting rolling out of DC charging itself and trying to just smooth the paperwork, improve it. There are lots and lots of examples from overseas of what works. Norway is now up to over 60% of car sales are plug-in electric vehicles.
I think you're actually wrong there. I think you touched on it before. We'll be forced into it anyway.
Yes.
You won't be able to buy.
But what would I do now to encourage it so we actually meet our greenhouse targets apart, rather than overshoot them by a mile that we're going to?
So you actually don't need to make a decision now.
Which is exactly what they've done.
I think we might stop. Bryce, could you tell us about the 2020 EV vision? Can't remind writing that the Expo coming up in October.
AEVA have an annual conference Expo that runs from state to state. Each state branch does it with their AGMs each year. And this year it's in Melbourne, and we're running what's called the 2020 EV Vision Conference. Subtitled, "The future is clear, EVs are here." It's pretty much the case. The Friday 9th will be a conference, a paying conference with 3 streams, 1 industry, 1 general public and 1 conversion. There'll be the 3 broad topics. The evening will be a formal dinner and awards night for EVs, for various awards categories around Australia, for government events or community events that have been run, that type of thing, as well as awards for the types of cars. The exact awards haven't been settled on yet, but that will be a really fun evening. And on the Saturday will be a Expo. This is all at Showground, Melbourne Showgrounds, by the way. And the Saturday will be an Expo and car test drives. So there'll be various manufacturers bring their cars down. Private owners will take you for drives as well. About a 10, 12 kilometre course we've mapped out coming in and out of the Flemington Showgrounds. And another area set aside for test riding, bicycles, scooters, skateboards, whatever. And there'll be public talks running all that day Saturday as well.
The last one in Sydney, how many test drives did you do?
It was about 1,000, 1,200 test drives were done over the 2 days that it was run. It was quite long queues, up to an hour at some stages. This year we'll organise it slightly better because I think most of the 3/4 people are waiting for the test stop. Model 3. So if you're wanting to jump in an old conversion, it was as soon as it pulled up, you jumped in. So this year we'll actually we'll have a sign saying what sort of car, and then you can decide, okay, that's a long queue, but this one's a short queue, I'll do that one first.
And there'll be a need for volunteers on the weekend.
Yes.
Also there's an organising committee if anyone's keen.
Yep, we have an organising committee. There's about 14 people on it at the moment. It's sort of accidentally been a bit like the Whitlam cabinet in 1973. Chris Nash and I have been doing all we got together the group to start with, and we sort of came up with all the basic ideas. Chris and I are sort of basically putting all those building blocks into place that then can go back to the committee to say, there's your block, there's your block, there's your block, off you go. And at that point, we're definitely wanting, if anybody's interested in any one of those parts, have a chat.
There'll be lots of needed on the weekend.
On the weekend itself, we'll
join the AEVA.
There'll be a call out through. There'll be a call out through Renew anyway. We work together. The 2 groups work together. So you don't have to. I'm happy for you to join AEVA, but if you're a Renew member, there will be a call out for Renew members to help.
Bryce is also the editor of the AEVA
quarterly national newsletter.
And it's a fantastic document. If you want to know anything about electric vehicles, it's there.
Yes, so as a member, that's one of the benefits. You get this, it's about 60 pages done quarterly, sort of local and national and international news on EVs, and it also has all the branch events and things coming up, and you'll read up what each branch is doing, and the Victorian branch is all in there.
The other place to get information is the website The Driven, or Renew Economy. They have electric vehicles.
Yes, The Driven is...
Monday to Friday they come daily.
Yes, The Driven is an Australian dedicated EV website, so it's all the Australian flavour news about EVs happening all around the world in Australia.
So Bryce, if we want to get your slides, how do we do that?
EVNews@bigpond.com.
Okay, so I think a big round of applause.
Thank you.